I'm Lauren.
And I'm Lisa.
And we're flipping the script about growing older.
Our guests have been influencers since before that was even a thing. Welcome to the Anti-Aging Podcast.
Welcome to Age Like a Badass Mother.
Welcome, guests. Today we have Dr. Matthew Lederman, who is an internal medicine physician who shook up the world and the status quo with his wife, Dr. Ilona Polday, when they were featured in the groundbreaking documentary Forks Over Knives, a film that launched a lifestyle medicine revolution. Dr. Lederman and Dr. Polday spent 10 years as VPs of Whole Foods Market's medical affairs and launched the company's comprehensive medical and wellness centers and integrated hospital and insurance network. Always the pioneer in wellness, Lederman saw another gaping hole in medicine and dove deeper. He completed his CNVC trainer certification in nonviolent communication, which he believes is the foundation on which mind, body, and interpersonal healing lies. Together in 2023, Lederman and Polday launched WeHeal, a nutrition, lifestyle, and connection medicine virtual model. Simultaneously, the doctors developed WeBecome, an innovative, fun, and practical tool for helping children and adults regulate and calm their nervous systems. Doctor, husband, father, inventor, innovator, and always ahead of the curve, it is no wonder Dr. Dean Ornish calls Matthew Lederman a doctor of the future. How do you do it?
Well, it's interesting. You ask how we do it. And one of the things that we're always focused on is how to make life more wonderful. And it sounds a little cheesy, but at the same time, that's what drives us. So if we see a need, we try to learn about it, figure out how to address it, and then fill it, right? So that to me is where things like focusing on plant-based nutrition, focusing on lifestyle, nonviolent communication, calm and regulation, all of that stuff is really coming from that desire to help people just make life more wonderful.
Yeah. So we interviewed Ilona, your talented, wonderful wife and partner in all crimes already. And we talked about the 9 pillars of making life wonderful, the pillars of WeHeal. But maybe for people who haven't heard that, can you just quickly go through the 9 pillars just to give people a background of, and why does this make your life wonderful?
So there's connecting to yourself. That's the first pillar, connecting inside what's going on, what you're feeling, what's alive inside of you, right? So what are your feelings? What are your needs, which a lot of people have a hard time identifying. And then from there, you want to resource your internal world through sleep, nutrition, activity, and play. Those are 4 more pillars: sleep, nutrition, activity, and play. And then once your internal world's resourced, what's alive inside of you, what you're feeling and needing, you can then go out into the external world and connect, which really brings home the joy. So the external world are the other 4 pillars, which is family and friends, connecting to your work, which includes meaning and purpose, spirituality, which includes something greater than connecting to something greater than yourself. And then there's the natural world, which is all of the life on this planet. So those are the 9 pillars: yourself, sleep, nutrition, activity, play, and then family, friends, work, spirituality, and the natural world. And when you have all of those pillars being tended to, and they're going to be out of balance in different ways at different times, but when you have an awareness of all of those and you're heading in the direction of tending to all of those, that's when life really becomes wonderful.
How did you come to figure that out? These are the 9 things you need. How did you figure that out?
Well, one of the things I say to everybody is that I reserve the right to change my mind. This is based on what I know right now. So a year from now, we might say, oh, we learned something else and we got to do things a little differently. But at this point, the culmination of all of our learnings and experience, this is what we found were the areas to focus on with patients, within ourselves, within everybody around us. If this really captured and put that into some framework, right? Because it's really just a framework. You don't have to rigidly follow these things. It's a map that will get you closer to life is wonderful when you tend to those 9 pillars.
I mean, it's so powerful when you frame it that way, because this podcast is about aging well. How do we age well? And you've just touched on so many areas that help propel us as we age in a very positive way. And that when those things aren't tended to, in my opinion, so many of these things you mention are where there are weaknesses for a lot of people who are not aging well. They're not tending to many of these things, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And to me, aging is living, right? We all are getting older every minute, every day. So you're not living well if these pillars are out of balance in some way. And it's not that they have to be in balance all the time. It's that you have to be aware of them and tend to them. Like you don't even have to, in NVC and nonviolent communication, we talk about how you don't have to have the needs even met to start feeling inner peace. You just have to be aware of them and connect to them. So to me, it's not that life has to have this all figured out. It's some destination that you get to. It's having an awareness and an intention to tend to them that makes a difference. So aging, to me, it's living, whether you have another, year left or 50 years left. It's how do you want to live that time that you do have left? And to me, when you tend to these pillars in this way, it makes that time more wonderful.
Say you're 60 or 70 or 80 and you decide you've had enough. You want to change. You want to dive into these 9 pillars. Is there a difference in that ability to rewire those pathways when you're 70 or 80 or 60 than if you started sooner, would you say?
I think there's a difference in your confidence and your ability to do that, right? And some people, when they're younger, are very stuck and don't think that they can grow and change, right? There's fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets, right? So, but anybody can change, right? I mean, you can go and think about something, for example, going to another country where they drive on the opposite side of the road. You can choose to stay in your house and not drive, or you can go out there and learn how to drive. And it's going to feel funny at first, and you're going to have to keep doing it. And then eventually your brain is just going to say, oh, this is how we do. This is how we drive now. So it's possible. You just have to believe you can do it, be motivated to do it, and then go out and do it.
Is that what polyvagal theory is? Can you give us a little background for those who don't know what it is?
Yeah. So polyvagal theory is a way of explaining how our bodies interact with our environment, right? So there's an autonomic nervous system. When people have usually heard of fight or flight response, the sympathetic drive, right? And there's parasympathetics, which is the other side of that, and it's this balance that's happening where you need to say, how dangerous is my environment? How much threat am I in? And based on that, I'm going to increase sympathetics, or if I'm pretty safe, I can increase parasympathetic tone, right? And it's that balance that's always happening. And you're experiencing your environment. And at every minute, there's tons of bits of information coming in through all of your senses, through your thoughts, through your feelings, through your eyes, through your nose, through your mouth, right, through your ears. And your body is trying to take all that information in and then quickly assess how much sympathetic tone, or can we turn on our safety system, which is the parasympathetics. Based on that, it'll affect our health, right? So this is why it affects our health, though. If I put a tiger in the room and your sympathetics, your body says, oh my God, there's a tiger. We got to turn on sympathetics, fight or flee, right? Or if we really think we're in trouble, we might freeze and pass out and faint, right? But all of those are responses to danger or threat. Part of that is an increase in pro-inflammatory cytokines at the cellular level, shifts in how the mitochondria interact, shifts in how ATP in your body reacts, right? There's shifts in blood flow. There's shifts in hormones that are released. All of that is to prepare to fight the threat and to deal with tissue damage as a result of that threat, to deal with certain types of infection, bacteria infection from getting bit by the tiger. All of that is your body trying to prepare for that. Now, once the tiger is gone, it says, hey, we can turn off all of our energy that's going in towards preparing for damage from the tiger. We can turn on anti-inflammatory cytokines. We can get rid of the adrenaline and cortisol. We can now shift to fight. Instead of fighting bacteria, our immune system is going to fight other things. For example, might be looking for cancer cells now more effectively, right? All of that shifts. We can now reproduce, and we get this message to our gut that's coming and saying, hey, you can now digest your food again. The tiger's gone, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what's happening. But what's going on, what people don't realize is that a physical threat like a tiger and an emotional threat or a spiritual threat or a mental threat have the same impact on that physiology in your body. So if we are walking around every minute of every day thinking that there's a threat, experiencing threat in our emotions, right, through suppressed emotion or through spiritual, right, we lose all meaning and purpose. We don't know why we're getting up.
Negative
all of that
thought
affects
patterns.
negative thought patterns. All of that affects your physiology as if there was a tiger in the room. So that's the challenge is when tiger's gone, you turn off all that, you shift all that physiology towards safety physiology, and we're doing great. But people right now are chronically in this fight physiology, this threat physiology. And with that comes these diseases as a result of that physiology being turned on when it shouldn't be. And what's more than that is that it's a muscle. So if we are constantly, it's almost like driving on the left side of the road all day, and I throw you in to driving on the right side of the road, your body is going to say, whoa, this is weird. It's not going to know how to do it. You're going to bump into things. But after time of practice, you're going to be able to do it. Similarly, turning on your safety physiology is a learned sort of muscle that we can grow. And if you're so busy living in sympathetic drive, fight or flight drive, you don't really get a chance to grow that other muscle. So it's like a guitar that's tuned too tight, right? It's this high frequency of threat. We got to retune our guitar. And that's the other thing that's exciting is that you can retune your bodies to be much better at turning on the safety physiology and not activating the threat physiology unnecessarily.
How do you do that?
So, for example,
the 9 pillars.
one of the most powerful ways to turn off threat physiology is through breath. So if you do a prolonged exhalation, like that's why we created the WeBecome, because kids, when they're mobilized and jumping around or fighting or screaming, that's threat physiology, right? It's constant, it's mixed in with play a lot of the time, but it's still that same mobilization that happens, even though it's mobilization and play. What happens is we got to get them to calm down, just like we got to get an adult to calm their bodies down and there's no tiger, right?
Describe
telling them there's no tiger.
Describe the audience.
Right. So the WeBecome was to help people take advantage of 3 calming pathways. One is the slow exhale. So this device
which looks like a pipe a little bit, by the way, for our listeners.
Right. It's a breathing tube that slows exhalation so that for you to blow out comfortably, you have to blow out slowly. And then at the same time, while you're blowing out, there's a ball in this indicator device that's held up. So when you blow out, you're holding the ball up and you're focusing your attention on keeping the ball up. So we'll tell kids based on your age to hold the ball that number of seconds until you're 10 years old. And then we have everybody hold for 10 seconds if you're above 10. And the third is there's white noise that helps with auditory regulation because we want to try and come at all the senses. So prolonged exhalation, focused attention with your eyes, auditory regulation with the white noise. And through those pathways, your body starts to get messages of, hey, we're okay, we're safe. And that regulates and calms the nervous system. So those are the 3 pathways. And you can see I guess people can't see, but
it's a podcast.
Right. You too can see the ball go up, and there's on our website, WeBecome.com, you can see examples of it. There's actually a 4th pathway too. So I could tell you about that in a second.
No, tell us about the 4th pathway.
So the 4th pathway we have, it's called co-regulation. And we have a bracelet that comes with the device, a larger one for the adult and a smaller one for the kids. And on there, it says, we be in this together. And the idea is that you have this on and that you agree to come together and help each other find more calm. So it's not a pacifier that you shove in your kid's mouth. It's not a punishment, right? It's a tool that helps you feel better, right? Why wouldn't you want that? So let's work together as a team to help each other calm. So my kids, and I had an agreement with them, and I recommend all parents introduce it this way, saying, hey, we both could use, and sometimes you can tell when I'm tense before I can tell. So I'll say, hey, kids, if you notice I'm starting to get tense, can you please hold up the bracelet and say, hey, Dad, would you enjoy, remember our agreement way back when, would you enjoy some breaths on the WeBecome?
Can you talk a little bit about the nonviolent communication? I feel like I wish I would have done better with this as a parent. Like, I definitely said terrible things like, shut the fuck up. Are you kidding? But like with a little humor behind it, like they weren't scared of me or anything, but I wish I would have maybe not.
You weren't the tiger in the room?
Definitely not a tiger, but they're, like, shut up. That's ridiculous. Or I wish I wouldn't have said things like that, even though it was said with mild humor. So can you talk about that?
Well, we didn't have the tools.
Well,
no,
yeah,
right.
and I appreciate that because we teach, and that's the other part of We Become is a parenting. We coach parents and families, and we have a special type of, we call it Dear Weeby, like a blog that helps parents with a tough question. You can write in, and here's the issue and how we would approach it with our parenting philosophy that we call collaborative, non-permissive parenting. Right? So it's collaborative. We're working as a team together. Everybody's needs matter, but it's non-permissive. Everybody's needs matter, meaning I'm not going to proceed with a strategy that only meets your needs. It's got to meet my needs too. Right? And that's the essence of everything that we do is around that collaboration and that non-permissive approach. So
I think that would work with a partner too, right? Sorry to interrupt, but like that would work with like your spouse as well, right? Not just kids.
Exactly. It works very well with both kids and with adults, everybody, because it's the same intention. Right. The idea is that we don't think of kids as less than adults. Right. To me, they're all humans. They all have hearts. They all have the same universal needs. But we treat kids a little bit differently than adults. And that is the beginning of the ability to speak to them with less connection, intention, and to actually begin the path of violence, right? If we start to objectify people, we disconnect from their hearts and we dehumanize them in any way, that's when violence is not far behind, whether it's physical violence or verbal, emotional, spiritual violence.
What I think is key, though, about your description is the non-permissive, because the misconception when people first hear about and using NVC with your kids is that it's a permissive. So I love that because I think for me, I see a lot of my generation raising our kids in that way because we're trying to do better than our parents did. So we're sort of flipping to the opposite, and that's not working either. So this collaborative approach is hugely empowering for the kids and supportive. And I do want to say that Judah, our son, who just turned 20, by the way, but at 19, and I did a session with Matt, and he still tells all his friends how helpful that was. And when they're having problems with their parents, he's like, can Matt talk to so and their mom? Because just that one session, he got so much out of it. And also when we did the workshop in Austin, we had a mom and her son. Actually, Matt worked with them one-on-one in the room. And it was incredible to watch this teenager who, was there with his arms crossed and like, this is dumb, to actually having this beautiful communication with his mother, and the mother crying from the connection that the two of them had together. So it is I've seen it in action, and it's very powerful.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, because it's the intention to connect with that other person. Right? A lot of parents think, oh, my kid's not interested in a relationship. My teenager is so rebellious. But everybody, from an NVC perspective, everybody's just trying to meet needs, and everybody values connection. And to be honest, with their parents, they want to be, there's almost like this genetic drive to be seen by your parents. So they will give more chances to their parents than anybody else. So the parents think they might be feeling hopeless. But actually, if you show up differently and start to rebuild trust, you can almost always salvage the connection. And the kids, I've talked to many children, teenagers, and they all said, if my parents could talk to me this way, I would love to talk with them. So it's not a lack of desire. In fact, they're longing for connection with their parents, but they will not sacrifice their needs that are so important. For example, that come up, autonomy, to be heard, to trust that their needs matter. All of those, if those aren't met in the relationship, they're going to avoid the relationship to preserve those needs being met. If they can't see a way to get those needs met in the relationship, they will choose, even though it's a cost and it's sad, to not be in a relationship. Right? So that's those are examples of how we approach NVC with NVC is say, what needs is my child trying to meet right now? What needs are coming up in me? And do I want to connect about that versus do I just want them to do what I want? Because if I just focus on them doing what I want.
So when your teenager is acting like a jerk, it's needs that aren't being met. but we get mad and we're like, why are you acting like a jerk? Instead of asking the question, what is my teenager? What need isn't being met? Instead of connecting with them and asking them.
Right.
How would
so
you
there's
do
a couple
that?
of steps. There's a couple of steps there. The first thing is when I think my teenager is a jerk, I have work to do internally before I even open my mouth with my teenager. And this happens to this day. I had somebody that I had to talk to that would always tell a story when I ask a question. Not always. I'd say 8 times out of 10 would tell a story. It'd be 10 minutes before I got the answer to a question that I thought could be answered with a yes or no. And I said, I have an image in my head. We call them enemy images, where I think that he talks too much. As soon as I have that image, I have to pause. I say, we need to connect. But first, I can't connect with him if I have a thought that he talks too much. Even just thinking it affects my connection with the person. So what I do is I had to spend some time saying, why is he telling a story like that? Oh, he's really trying to help make sure he's understood and heard and be impactful and maybe be inspiring. Oh, okay. So he really wants to inspire us and he's just so excited to work with us and talk to us. I got it. That's what his good intention is. So I got to see their heart and their good intention. Once I see their good intention, then I can make sure they know I see their good intention, so then they can hear my need that's not being met. But most people don't express their needs that aren't being met. So when a parent goes to a child and goes right to their need not being met, the child is usually going to hear, you're to blame, and I want you to feel bad about yourself for not meeting my need. Do you see why that's not going to be connecting? So there's a couple of steps here that it might sound complicated, but in practice, it actually isn't. It's to say, okay, what's their good intention, right? See that. It's not to try and suppress the fact that I thought my child is a jerk or being a jerk. It's to say, okay, what's the need behind that thought? My child is a jerk. My need might be, they're feeling, I have a need for more respect and consideration. Okay, so when I need more respect and consideration, my body communicates that to me by saying my child's a jerk. Okay, I get it now. Now, when I tell somebody else about my child being a jerk, what's my need there? Oh, I need empathy. I need someone else to also feel help be with me around this pain, around my needs for respect and consideration not being met. Does that make sense? Like that I'm connecting to the needs behind the judgments. So I don't want to suppress judgments. Those are not going to go away from most people. But if I can take a minute to pause, connect to the needs underneath, that's when the connection starts to happen.
So that's a muscle that you've developed through the practice of NVC.
That's the muscle I continue to train every day. In fact, just today, I was listening to some recordings that are helping me continue, because it's so ingrained around, right? It's like in the movies, right? How do all movies climax? The good guy beats or kills the bad guy, right? There's such a thing as a good guy. There's such a thing as a bad guy. There's no way we're going to get to connection, right? In the news, right? There's either you like this candidate, you like that candidate. These people are good. These people are bad, right? You cannot connect with that good or bad, right or wrong thinking. So to me, it's all about the connection. That's what NBC is about. And that I care more about creating a connection with you and trying to see what's in your heart and trying to express what's in my heart in a way that brings us closer together. And you can do that with children too.
So what's the next step? Like your kid's being a jerk, but you identify, okay, that's the next step. I need some respect. My kid needs something. Then you try to identify what your kid needs, and then what do you do?
So you try and identify what your kid needs. So for example, if let's say you play the kid and I'm Lauren, right? And I'm now saying, I have this thought that my kid is a jerk. I think I'm needing more respect and consideration, or I need to trust that my needs matter to my kid, but I'm not sure what my kid is doing that's causing me to think that. So Lauren, can you tell me, as your kid, what did you do that made me think, that stimulated that thought in my head?
Oh, I rolled my eyes at you and slammed my door and said, "You're ruining my life."
Perfect. There we go. So when a kid, just stop at the rolling the eyes. I tell my kids. That's
never happened to me, by the way.
When my kids roll my eyes, I say, "Oh, I saw that you rolled your eyes." So I'm assuming you're trying to tell me that there's something not working for you, but you're worried that if you speak up, it's going to cause a fight or disconnection, so that you're sort of sneaking it in with an eye roll. So maybe you don't have trust that we can talk about it. But my belief is that there's something not working for you, and I want you to hear that I care about that. So can you tell me back what you're hearing? Can you tell me about what you're hearing? Because I want to make sure I'm being clear. And they're going to say, what would you say as the kid? What did you hear me just say?
You're right. I rolled my eyes because, I know you're going to, I don't know, go into some
Tell me to do something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Tell me to do something. Right. Talk about something that I don't want to talk about.
I don't want to
Give
hear
me a
about.
speech.
Right.
Right. So here's the other thing. In fact, I just brought this up with my daughter this morning on the way to school, right? To talk about something that she didn't want. And I said, the other day I was telling you about a situation with your friend, and I was trying to work it out with you. But there was a part of me that was worried that you were just listening to be polite because you didn't want to hurt my feelings or tell me that you didn't really feel like talking about it anymore. Was there any part of you that felt pressure to talk even though you didn't want to? And she said, Dad, actually, there was a little part. And I said, well, I'm so glad you told me now. And I would love it even more if you told me in the moment. And she said, Dad, well, I'm worried about hurting your feelings. I said, well, that's great. I really appreciate that care. And I'd love to figure out a way that you can communicate when something's not working for you in a way that also meets your need for caring for me. Let's put our heads together around that. How does that feel? And she said, that feels really good, Dad. So do you see how in that little exchange, all the things that I was doing to build connection and trust with her?
Yeah.
And that's what can happen with your kids. You can say that to your kids. You can say, hey, kid.
Well, yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say with Judah, I think it was something as simple as he doesn't respect me because he leaves the iced tea out on the counter and he doesn't put it back in the refrigerator. And I've asked him again and again. And it was so easy for Matt to be like, what need of mine wasn't being met? A need for cleanliness in the kitchen or whatever. And I don't remember what Judah's need was, but his intention wasn't, what we got down to is his intention wasn't to be like, screw you, I'm going to leave the tea out. That wasn't where his head was at all. And I think I probably shouldn't have interrupted because you were probably getting there, but that's what you were,
that example, every judgment gives us clues into the needs. So they're just tragic expressions of unmet needs. So for example, you said my need was cleanliness in the kitchen, but really when you heard your words that you're using, I asked him again and again, it was more for what I was hearing a need around what you were saying to really matter to him. Right. And when you were asking him to clean something up again and again, and you don't see him doing it, you start to think it doesn't matter to him. And then what gets you angry is the story in your head that he doesn't care about what I say. It's not that what he's doing. It's your story in your head. And he wanted you to know that he does care. Right. And that but there are other needs of his that were preventing him from putting it away in the time or in the way that you wanted. So, but what you needed before about addressing, it wasn't about the iced tea. It was about him hearing your need for mattering, but to hear it without hearing criticism or blame, for you to see his good intentions, that he wasn't this bad kid that doesn't care about your needs, which is your story. Right. And he knows that. So that's why he gets defensive if he thinks that is your story. So to me, his need was different, right? It could have been a little bit more ease and flow. It could have been, I just don't remember these things. And when I put things away, Mom, is when I see them. And then I put it away when I see it, or sometimes I see it and I don't even put it away. I'm okay with iced tea being on the counter.
All right.
Right. So now what do we do, Mom, when I'm okay with iced tea being on the counter and you don't like iced tea on the counter? Can you first, instead of telling me that the right way to do it is to have iced tea back in the fridge, can you acknowledge that there's some people that iced tea on the counter is okay? So if he trusts that you care about his needs and you're trying to connect to him about his needs, and he's like, okay, so Mom, thank you so much for seeing that iced tea on the counter is okay. I'm willing now that you don't think I'm this bad person and that you see my good intentions. I'm willing to consider ways of contributing to you to put the iced tea away, right? Because I know it makes your life more wonderful. But I only want to do that if I'm doing that because I am giving it to you as a gift, not because I want you to not hate me, not punish me, or to love me more if I put it away.
Yeah.
Right, not yell at you, right? Who wants to do something out of that energy? So the connection energy is to say, hey, Mom, what are ways that you can help me meet my need to contribute to you and put this iced tea away? And we came up with some strategies around that. But the joy, the love was in the connection around seeing his good intentions, seeing his goodness, and you trusting that he heard about your need to matter coming up.
Yeah. And my patterns of the way I was raised, like, it's like, do as I say, not as I do. Children should be seen and not heard. It's like breaking those patterns and realizing how much I do want to have connection with my son and I don't want that dynamic was really an incredible experience when we were with you, which leads me to say that you need to be at my house all the time.
Yeah, just move in.
Exactly. It's funny because here's what parents fight about: the iced tea. He puts away the iced tea with anger and resentment. The iced tea is back in the fridge and you don't feel any better because your need wasn't getting the iced tea back in the fridge. That was a strategy, and your real need was to have a connection with him where you trusted that he cared about your needs. And when you see him not doing something that you've asked multiple times, you start to wonder if he cares. And that's where the foundation of a lot of the pain is in families, is we start to lose trust that the other person cares and can see our goodness. Those are two big ones.
Think we've just talked so much about connection today. And I think that is like all the pillars are important, obviously, from wellness to wonderful and WeHeal. Wellness to Wonderful is the book and WeHeal is the program. But that connection is so important, and that if you don't have that connection with other people, you do age really poorly. That's probably one of the, I think, most of the key. And they say that, like, if you have a partner that you love, or if you have a tribe, you're a couple good friends, that you live longer, you live healthier, you have less inflammation, you have less disease. I mean, it's so important. So it is something that needs to be exercised. And I am going to put this to work, like, because I have a need for my husband not to wipe his mouth on the dish towel, and he has a need to do that.
Wait, that happens at your house too?
Oh my God. I'm really going to have to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm just going to have to be.
That's going to have to be a whole nother podcast, I think.
Well, I do want to say, though, when it comes to connection, I think one of the things that it's easier for me and probably for a lot of people to recognize the need for connection among their tribe and with other people. It's a little harder to recognize that connection with the self. And where, Matt, you said where it begins with the connection of the self. And I think that for me anyway, that's where the work really, really is, where it really lives for me personally.
Right. To be able to know what's alive inside of you is so hard for people. And when I say alive, it's what are you feeling? What are you needing? So when you have we're taught to think in judgments, who's to blame, right? Who's the perpetrator? What do I need to do? What do I need to stop the other person from doing? That's how we're taught to think about. And we don't connect to our hearts. And it's very vulnerable, but it's very powerful. And that ability to connect to your hearts, there's data on this around the impact of connecting and not suppressing what you're feeling and what you're needing, and how that affects your health, but how it affects your joy in life, how that affects your relationships. And the good news is this can be taught, right? These are all skills that can be learned and practiced. But it really does start with a lot of people start with NVC, nonviolent communication, about what do I say to the other person? And I really want you to start shifting your intention. Why are you even talking? What's your need there?
Can you make this really clear that this is not selfish, that it's not reserved for certain people with certain lifestyles? Like, this is something that I wish were taught in public school. These are tools that I wish. And then it could trickle up, right? And then leaders of nations would be able to connect instead of you're bad and I'm good. But so how would you, frame that for us, and for the inner city mom with 5 kids and 3 jobs, and frame it so that it's not selfish?
Yeah. So taking care of yourself is essential. There's nothing, what does selfish mean? Selfish, I like to translate that into NVC language, would be, I want to make sure we care about your needs and my needs. We don't just care about your needs. But how can you care about someone else's needs and connect to somebody else if you're not clear what your needs are? If all you're thinking about is judgments and complaints, you can't connect to somebody else in a way that's meaningful to them. Everybody that we teach nonviolent communication to, the intention, the energy around it, they feel wonderful. They love it. Mm-hmm. They may not know how to do it in their house. They may not know how to do it in their jobs. So to me, doing this work is the first step of doing something that everybody thinks is wonderful. Everybody says feels wonderful.
So the first step then for any person is to just be able to take that moment to connect with what you're needing.
Right. To recognize that you have needs. So when, for example, we think of strategies as needs a lot of the time, right? So we'll say, I have a need for Judah to clean up the iced tea from the counter, right? But you don't really have a need for that. That's a strategy to meet needs, right? You want to have organization and cleanliness in the kitchen, and you want what you say to matter, and you want your agreement, you want integrity around agreements and things, reliability around things that you've said. Those are, right? He could, whether he cleans it up or he pays for someone else to clean it up, or he says, hey, Mom, every time I leave the iced tea out there and you clean up for me, I'd like to give you a 10-minute massage and talk to you about my day. You might say, you know what? That's a pretty good deal. I like that. So it's not that you need the
I think that was the strategy we came up with.
I think that was actually. But you see what I'm saying? Like, I like to come up with strategies that show, okay, I don't need him to put that away. That would be nice because it would meet this need. But there's other ways to meet my needs. And if I can find a way that meets my needs and cares about his needs, we're going to be better off. Mm. And if he thinks that all you care about is getting him to put that iced tea back in the fridge, you're further away than ever from that place where everybody's needs are cared about and met.
Well, and also it doesn't meet his need for autonomy when I'm telling him what to do, which is a big one with teenagers, right?
Exactly. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit because we're just to be cognizant of time. But so you came to the public by being in the documentary Forks Over Knives, which I think a lot of people see that movie and then they try to go plant-based. What do you think eating plant-based does for aging well?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I mean, your body, this is what I think people think there's something wrong with their body and they need to do things to fix it. I think of it as your body naturally wants to age well, and we've been doing things to get in the way of it. This is the best way to age like a badass, right? Like this is like, I can't think of another way I want to go through the remaining years of my life other than optimizing connection, eating this way, interacting with people where I care about their needs and meeting their needs and my needs is the goal, right? That's what I want. And that's what's going to make life wonderful, whether I have a year left or 50 years left. That's the goal.